Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're cracking open Hacking for Beginners by Manthan Desai. I gotta say, this book surprised me. It's way more practical than I expected, even for someone like me, not exactly a coding guru.
Yeah, it's deceptively approachable, right? It
Yeah.
dives into techniques hackers use but flips the script. It's about how you can use this knowledge to protect yourself.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The book outlines different types of hackers, but then gets into how email really works behind the scenes. SMTP, POP3, IMEB. It explains it clearly, but why is this so important for, everyday users?
Because it's like learning the language of your enemy. Knowing how email travels makes you a more informed user. You start spotting phishing attempts and shady emails so much easier.
The book actually shows you how to set up a basic email server on your PC. Pretty cool. But then it goes into email security. Things like spoofing and bombing.
Email bombing.
Email bombing. That being stuck in an endless reply all.
Think worse. Denial of service attack. Someone floods your inbox. Thousands, millions of messages. Shuts down your email. The book covers how to protect yourself. Crucial in today's world.
Then there's the Windows hacking section. Eye-opening. Apparently there's this file, the SAM, where Windows keeps password hashes.
Right, and what's fascinating, how the book explains password hashing. It's not storing your password plain text. It's converted to a unique string of characters, a hash. Hackers can use tools, try to crack these hashes, but the stronger the hash, harder to break.
So random string of characters are best bet.
Absolutely. Book drives home why using uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters is so important. Longer the better. Ideally, a different password for each online account.
That makes sense. The book also goes into these intense-sounding attacks, like Trojan horse attacks. What exactly is a Trojan horse attack?
A type of malware. Disguised as legitimate software, you download a harmless file, but it secretly installs malicious code on your computer. Book explains how they work and how to protect yourself.
Sounds like something I definitely want to avoid. The book covers web server vulnerabilities too, right? I feel like we hear about that in the news all the time.
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting. The book talks about how hackers can exploit weaknesses in web servers to gain access to sensitive data, even take control of the entire server. Highlights common vulnerabilities, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, explains how developers can prevent these attacks.
Feels like a constant cat and mouse game, between hackers and developers. Speaking of vulnerabilities, what about wireless hacking? I mean, pretty much everyone uses Wi-Fi these days.
Right, and unfortunately, Wi-Fi networks, major targets for hackers. The book talks about how they exploit weak security settings, steal passwords, hijack devices connected to your network.
That's unsettling. What are some basic steps people can take to secure their Wi-Fi networks?
The book really emphasizes using strong, unique passwords for your router, enabling the strongest encryption protocol, typically WPA2. Also, advise against using the default network name makes it easier for hackers.
Okay, good to know. The book even covers mobile phone security risks. It mentions blue snarfing. Is that like getting the blues from staring at your phone too long?
Not as harmless as it sounds. Blue snarfing lets someone steal information from your device through Bluetooth. Imagine walking by, someone grabs your contacts, calendar, even photos you don't realize. Book explains how to protect yourself from Bluetooth attacks. Disable Bluetooth when you're not using it.
That's wild. But this brings up another Kogan. The outline mentioned Google Dorks. What are those?
One of the more fascinating parts, Google Dorks are specific search queries hackers use to find vulnerable websites, like secret codes, unlock hidden info on the internet.
That's incredible. Can anyone learn to use these dorks?
The book hints at how you can use them for good, like checking your website or online accounts for security holes, like a secret weapon to stay one step ahead of the hackers.
Talk about turning the tables. This book is full of surprises.
What's really great, it empowers you to see technology from a hacker's perspective. Best way to learn how to defend yourself.
Exactly. It demystifies hacking. Shows it's not just some shadowy figure in a basement. It's about understanding the techniques and motivations behind these attacks so you can better protect yourself. But now, let's get into some specifics. The book has a whole section on email security, one of the most eye-opening parts for me. Who knew email could be so complicated?
Right, we use it every day, but most have no idea how it actually works, and that's exactly what the book dives into. The nitty-gritty of email transmission, SMTP, POP3, IMEI, all those technical
I
terms.
admit those terms always sound kind of intimidating.
They can be, but the book breaks them down so anyone can understand. It's like learning the anatomy of a system. Once you get how the parts work together, you can better identify the weak points, potential areas for attack.
Okay, that makes sense. And the book even have this step-by-step guide to configuring a basic email server on your own PC. Haven't tried that yet, but sounds like a cool project.
It is. It's one thing to read about how email works. Another to actually set up your own server gives you a real behind-the-scenes look at the process. You really appreciate the complexity of email communication.
Speaking of complexity, the book covers email spoofing. Can you explain what that is?
Email spoofing. A technique hackers use to make an email look like it's from a legitimate source, like your bank, a trusted online service. A classic social engineering tactic designed to trick you into giving away sensitive information.
So they're basically forging the sender's address to make it look like it's from someone you trust. That's sneaky.
It is. They exploit our trust in familiar brands, institutions, to trick us into letting our guard down.
So how can we protect ourselves from these spoofing attacks?
Book emphasizes carefully scrutinizing emails, especially those that request personal information or urge you to click on links. Always check the sender's address. Look for suspicious formatting, grammatical errors. Hover over links to see the actual web address before clicking.
So it's like being a digital detective. Gotta look for clues, be skeptical of anything that seems off.
Exactly. The book provides a great framework for developing those critical thinking skills when it comes to email security. Teaches you to question assumptions, not take things at face value.
Okay, I like that. So we talked about email spoofing, but the book also mentions email bombing, right?
Yes, and this is a particularly nasty attack, a denial of service attack. Someone floods your inbox with thousands, even millions of messages, effectively shutting down your email. Imagine opening your inbox and it's completely unusable, buried under a mountain of spam.
That sounds awful. What can you do to protect yourself from that?
Book covers various strategies: mitigating the risk of email bombing, setting up filters, block messages from specific senders or domains, using anti-spam software, even contacting your email provider for help.
So it's like having a floodgate for your inbox. You control what comes in, keep the unwanted stuff out.
Exactly. The book provides practical advice on how to build those floodgates, keep your inbox safe from attack.
That's really helpful. So we've covered email security pretty extensively, but the book also goes into detail about Windows hacking, which I gotta admit makes me a little nervous.
I understand. Windows is the most popular operating system in the world, which makes it a prime target for hackers. And the book, it doesn't shy away from the details, dives right into the Windows SAM file, which is where the operating system stores password hashes.
Right, we talked about that earlier, but can you explain a little more about what a hash is and why hackers are so interested in this SAM file?
Sure. A hash is a one-way function, converts data, in this case a password, into a unique string of characters. It's like a fingerprint for your password. The SAM file stores these password hashes, and hackers can use tools to try and crack them, essentially reversing the hashing process to figure out the original password.
So it's like a code-breaking puzzle.
Exactly. And the book explains the different techniques hackers use to crack password hashes: brute force attacks, dictionary attacks, rainbow table attacks.
Those all sound pretty intense. So what can we do to protect ourselves? Is a simple password enough?
Unfortunately, no. Simple passwords are incredibly easy to crack. The book really emphasizes using strong, unique passwords for your Windows account, any other online accounts you have. And by strong, I mean a random combination of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Ideally, at least 12 characters long.
Okay, that's a lot to remember. Are there any tools or strategies that can help us create and manage these super strong passwords?
Absolutely. The book recommends using a password manager. It's a software application that stores and generates strong, random passwords for you. You only need to remember one master password to unlock the password manager, and it will automatically fill in your passwords for you on different websites and applications.
That sounds like a lifesaver.
It is, and it's one of the best things you can do to improve your digital security.
So strong passwords, a password manager. Got it. What other steps can we take to protect our Windows computers from hackers?
The book highlights the importance of keeping your operating system and all your software up to date. Software updates often include security patches that fix vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit. It's like putting on armor. Each update adds another layer of protection.
So those annoying update notifications are actually important.
Very important. They might seem like a nuisance, but they're crucial for keeping your computer safe from attack.
Okay, I'll try to be more diligent about updating my software.
Yeah.
What about firewalls? Are those still important?
Absolutely. Firewalls are like a gatekeeper. They control what traffic is allowed in and out of your network. Think of it as a bouncer at a club. Checks IDs, only lets in those who are authorized to be there.
That's a great analogy.
Similarly, a firewall scrutinizes incoming and outgoing network traffic, blocking anything that looks suspicious or malicious. It's a fundamental part of your computer's security, and the book goes into detail about how firewalls work and how to configure them properly.
So strong passwords, a password managers, software updates, and a firewall. That's a pretty good starting point for securing our Windows computers. But the book doesn't stop there, right?
Not even close. We've only just scratched the surface. The world of hacking is vast, ever-changing. And this book, it's like a roadmap, guiding you through the digital landscape, showing you how to navigate the dangers.
And that's what we're here for, to help you decipher that roadmap, equip you with the knowledge you need to stay safe in the digital Wild West.
Now let's venture into the world of wireless networks.
Ooh, wireless hacking. This always feels a little mysterious to me.
Understandable. Wireless networks with their invisible signals, complex protocols, they can seem like a black box to a lot of people. But hacking for beginners really demystifies it. Shows you how hackers can exploit vulnerabilities in Wi-Fi to do things like snoop on your data or steal your passwords, even hijack your devices.
Okay, that does sound a little unnerving. So let's say I'm sitting in my favorite coffee shop, right, sipping a latte, browsing the web on their free Wi-Fi. What are some of the risks I might be facing?
Well, first and foremost, public Wi-Fi networks are often not as secure as your home network. They might not use strong encryption protocols, which means a hacker could potentially intercept your internet traffic, see what you're doing online.
Wait, so they could potentially see my passwords, my credit card information, if I'm shopping online?
That is a possibility if the website you're visiting doesn't use HTTPS, which encrypts your communication with the website. But even if the website is secure, a hacker on the same Wi-Fi network could still potentially see which websites you're visiting, what data you're sending and receiving.
Okay, that's definitely making me rethink using public Wi-Fi. So what can we do to protect ourselves? The book mentions VPNs earlier. Are those the answer?
VPNs, or virtual private networks, they're a great tool for enhancing your security on public Wi-Fi. Essentially, a VPN creates an encrypted tunnel between your device and a remote server. Makes it much harder for anyone on the same network to snoop on your traffic.
So it's like having a secret passageway for your data to travel through, hidden from prying eyes.
Exactly. Adds an extra layer of protection, especially when you're using a network you don't control, like a public Wi-Fi hotspot.
Okay, VPNs, got it. But what about our home Wi-Fi networks? What can we do to make sure those are secure?
The book emphasizes using a strong password for your router. And I don't mean just any password. It should be long, random, and unique. Avoid using common passwords or personal information that could be easily guessed.
Okay, long, random, unique. But with so many passwords to remember these days, how am I supposed to keep track of them all?
That's where a password manager comes in handy. It's a software application that stores all your passwords securely, so you only need to remember one master password to unlock the vault.
So it's like having a digital bodyguard for my passwords.
Exactly. It takes the burden of remembering complex passwords off your shoulders, so you can create strong, unique passwords for all your accounts without having to worry about forgetting them.
Okay, strong passwords and a password manager. What else should we be doing to secure our home Wi-Fi?
The book recommends enabling the strongest encryption protocol available, typically WPA2 or WPA3. These protocols encrypt the data that travels over your Wi-Fi network. Makes it much harder for hackers to intercept and decipher it.
So encryption is like putting our data in a secret code that only authorized devices can unlock.
Exactly. It's a crucial layer of protection for any wireless network.
This is all super helpful information. I feel like I'm starting to see my Wi-Fi network in a whole new light. It's not just a source of internet access, it's a potential entry point for hackers if I'm not careful.
That's a great way to think about it. And the book does a fantastic job of raising awareness about these potential vulnerabilities and empowering you to take steps to protect yourself.
Speaking of protecting ourselves, let's move on to the chapter on mobile phone security. I mean, our phones are basically mini computers that we carry around everywhere these days, so they must be prime targets for hackers, right?
You're absolutely right. Mobile phones have become incredibly powerful and sophisticated, but they're also susceptible to a wide range of security threats. The book covers everything from blue snarfing, which allows hackers to steal information via Bluetooth, to SMS and call forging, which can spoof your caller ID, even intercept voicemails.
Okay, hold on. Blue snarfing. That sounds like something out of a cartoon.
It might sound silly, but it's a real threat. Bluetooth, while convenient for connecting devices, can also be a security vulnerability if not used properly. Hackers can potentially exploit weaknesses in Bluetooth protocols to gain unauthorized access to your phone and steal data.
So should we just disable Bluetooth altogether?
It's not necessary to completely disable Bluetooth. Just be mindful of when and how you use it. Avoid pairing your phone with unknown devices and turn off Bluetooth when you're not using it. It's a simple step that can significantly reduce your risk.
Okay, good to know. What about those other mobile phone attacks you mentioned, like SMS and call forging? What are those all about?
SMS and call forging are techniques that hackers use to manipulate phone calls and text messages. They can spoof your caller ID, making it look like a call is coming from a trusted source, or they can intercept your text messages, potentially stealing sensitive information like verification codes.
So if I get a call from a number that looks like it's from my bank, it might not actually be my bank.
That's right. Always be wary of unsolicited calls or texts that ask for personal information. If you're ever in doubt, hang up and call the organization back using a verified phone number.
Okay, so it's all about being vigilant and not taking things at face value. What other mobile phone security tips does the book offer?
The book stresses the importance of using a strong password or PIN to lock your phone. It also recommends enabling two-factor authentication for important accounts like your email and social media accounts.
Two-factor authentication, that's where you need to enter a code from your phone in addition to your password, right?
Exactly. It adds an extra layer of security, making it much harder for hackers to access your accounts, even if they somehow obtain your password.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered Wi-Fi security, mobile phone security. What other digital dangers should we be aware of?
Well, one of the most insidious threats in the digital world is social engineering.
Social engineering. That sounds a bit like psychological manipulation.
It is, in a sense. Social engineering is the art of manipulating people into divulging confidential information or performing actions that compromise security. It's not about hacking into systems, it's about hacking into people's minds.
So it's like a con game, but played out in the digital realm.
Exactly. And it's incredibly effective. Hackers exploit our trust, our helpfulness, our fear to trick us into doing things that we wouldn't normally do.
Could you give us some examples of social engineering techniques?
Sure. One classic example is phishing. This involves sending emails or text messages that appear to be from legitimate organizations like banks, online retailers, or social media platforms.
Oh, I've seen those. They try to trick you into clicking on a link that takes you to a fake website where they steal your login credentials.
Exactly. They often use scare tactics, like claiming that your account has been compromised or there's a problem with your order, to create a sense of urgency and pressure you into acting without thinking.
So it's all about preying on people's emotions and vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And social engineering doesn't just happen online. Hackers can also use phone calls, text messages, or even in-person interactions to manipulate people.
So it's like a real-life con artist, but they're using technology to extend their reach.
Exactly. And the book does a fantastic job of exposing these tactics and teaching you how to spot the red flags.
So what's the best defense against social engineering?
The best defense is awareness, skepticism, and verification.
Awareness of the different techniques that social engineers use, skepticism of any unsolicited request for information, and verification of any claims or requests before taking action.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask questions, double-check information, trust your gut if something feels off.
So it's all about being street smart in the digital world.
Exactly. Just like you wouldn't give your wallet to a stranger on the street, you shouldn't give out your personal information online or over the phone unless you're absolutely sure you know who you're dealing with.
Okay, that's great advice. I feel like I'm learning so much about the dark side of the digital world.
And that's the point of hacking for beginners. It's not about scaring you, it's about empowering you with the knowledge you need to protect yourself. You know, one thing that struck me was how the book, it gets into the details of specific vulnerabilities, like take RFI attacks, for instance.
RFI attacks, refresh my memory. Those are, what again?
RFI stands for remote file inclusion. It's where they exploit weaknesses in web applications to essentially sneak in malicious code from an outside source. Like leaving a backdoor open in your website, hacker walks right in.
So it's a way for hackers to gain control of a website by tricking it into running their code.
Exactly. And the consequences can be pretty dire. I mean, the attacker could steal data, deface the website, even use the server to launch further attacks.
That sounds pretty serious. What can web developers do to protect themselves from these RFI attacks?
The book stresses validating user input, sanitizing any data that comes from external sources. It's like checking everyone's ID at the door before you let them into your party, you know?
Makes sense. Don't let any uninvited guests crash the system.
Right. And developers should also avoid using dynamic file inclusion mechanisms unless it's absolutely necessary, and always ensure that any included files are from trusted sources.
So it's all about being extra careful, cautious about what you let into your website's code.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the tools of the trade. Hacking for beginners, it doesn't just explain vulnerabilities, it gives a whole overview of the tools used in ethical hacking.
Okay, this is where I get a little lost. There are so many different tools out there. It's like learning a whole new language.
It can be overwhelming, but the book does a good job breaking it down. It covers network scanners, vulnerability scanners, password crackers, packet sniffers, you name it.
So it's like a hacker's toolbox.
Exactly. But it's not enough just to have the tools. You need to know how to use them correctly and responsibly.
Right, because a hammer can be used to build a house or to break a window.
Exactly. The book helps you understand which tools are best suited for different scenarios and how to use them effectively and ethically.
So speaking of different scenarios, one of the terms that always trips me up is SQL injection. Can you break that down for me?
Sure. SQL injection is a web application vulnerability that allows attackers to manipulate database queries. It's like sneaking a backdoor command to the database, tricking it into revealing information it shouldn't.
So it's a way of speaking the database's language, but with, like, malicious intent.
Precisely. And the book has some really clear examples of how this works, how attackers can exploit it.
This is all starting to sound a little paranoid. Feels like everywhere you turn, there's another potential vulnerability.
I understand that feeling. But remember, knowledge is power. By understanding these vulnerabilities, we can better protect ourselves.
You're right. So what can web developers do to protect against these SQL injection attacks?
The book emphasizes the importance of using parameterized queries, which essentially sanitize user input, make it harder for attackers to inject malicious code.
Okay, so it's like having a security checkpoint for the data before it enters the database.
Exactly. The book also recommends using a web application firewall, acts like a shield, detects and blocks malicious requests before they even reach the database.
That sounds pretty robust. Switching gears a bit, I was curious about the section on proxy servers. Are those always a bad thing?
Not necessarily. A proxy server acts as a middleman between your computer and the internet. It can be used to enhance privacy, mask your IP address, but hackers can also use them to hide their tracks.
So it's like wearing a disguise, but it could be a superhero or a villain wearing it.
Exactly. The book explains the different types of proxy servers and how they can be used for both legitimate and nefarious purposes.
Okay, that makes sense. Now on to something I've definitely heard about in the news. DDoS attacks. Those sound pretty scary.
They can be. DDoS attack stands for Distributed Denial of Service Attack. It's a way to overwhelm a server with traffic, making it inaccessible to legitimate users.
So it's like a digital traffic jam, clogging up the system, preventing anyone from getting through.
That's a great way to put it. Imagine a website suddenly gets millions of visitors all at once, server can't handle the load, crashes, takes the website offline.
What can website owners do to protect themselves from these DDoS attacks? It seems like a pretty helpless situation.
The book recommends using DDoS mitigation services. They act like traffic cops, filter out malicious traffic, keep the website running smoothly.
So it's like having a bouncer at the door of your website,
Yeah,
keeping out the troublemakers.
exactly. The book also emphasizes having a plan in place for responding to DDoS attacks because, unfortunately, they're becoming more common.
Okay, on to a lighter topic maybe. Let's talk about KPTCHA. You know those puzzles that websites make you solve to prove you're human? I gotta admit, sometimes those things drive me crazy.
I know what you mean. But they serve an important purpose. KTHA stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to tell computers and humans apart.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but essentially it's a way to prevent bots from accessing websites, performing actions that are meant for humans.
Like creating fake accounts or spamming forums.
Exactly. The book explains the different types of KPTCHA challenges, how they work.
Okay, so they're like little digital gatekeepers, keeping the bots at bay.
Mm.
But speaking of hidden corners of the internet, the book also mentions the deep web. Is that as scary as it sounds?
The deep web refers to the parts of the internet that aren't indexed by search engines. It's like a vast hidden city underneath the surface web we all know.
So it's not inherently good or bad, it's just different.
Exactly. The deep web, it contains a lot of legitimate content that's simply not accessible through traditional search engines. But it's also true that it's often associated with illegal activities.
So it's important to proceed with caution.
Absolutely. The book provides an overview of the deep web, explains how to access it safely, and the risks involved.
Now, one more topic before we wrap things up. What about the Internet of Things, or IoT? It seems like everything's getting connected these days.
You're right. The IoT refers to the network of devices that are connected to the internet. Your smart refrigerator, your fitness tracker, even your car.
So convenience comes with security risks.
Unfortunately, yes. The book explores the security implications of the IoT, highlighting the fact that these devices can be vulnerable to hacking.
That's a bit unsettling. What can we do to protect our IoT devices?
The book recommends using strong passwords, keeping the device's software updated, and being mindful of the data they collect and share.
So the same basic security principles apply to the IoT as to our computers and smartphones.
Exactly. It's all about being aware of the risks and taking proactive steps to protect ourselves.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Hacking for beginners is a real eye-opener. It's amazing how much there is to know about the world of hacking and cybersecurity.
It's a constantly evolving field, but this book provides a really solid foundation for anyone who wants to understand the basics.
And I think the most important takeaway is that knowledge is power. The more we understand about how hacking works, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep learning. And remember, the best way to beat the hackers is to think like one.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into hacking for beginners. Until next time, stay safe out there in the digital world.